So as people are joining still, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. I'm Krystal Oriadha. I am the Senior Director of Programs and Policy at the National Farm to School Network, and I will be what I like to call your conversation guide, not just your facilitator today, to really help you guide yourself through these tough conversations. So as we get started, we're going to want to ground ourselves in this moment as we embark in such an important conversation. Because today's session, we're talking about shifting power and centering racial equity. So I'm going to pass it to Rihanna to ground us.
Thank you, Krystal. Welcome, everyone. So good to be here. My name is Rahana Tejpar. I'm with The Outside. And alongside Yolanda, we've been supporting NFSN in this process as facilitators, centering equity and systems change. And yeah, as a way of beginning, we want to acknowledge that we're all zooming around a lot. And so want to just give us a moment to ground and center here to this present moment so that we can be here fully for this really important conversation. So I want to welcome us to take 3 collective breaths, if that feels good for you, always by invitation. But if you feel like it, we can take 3 deep breaths together. Feel free to release with a sigh or a sound if that feels good. Yeah, and just welcoming a little connection to the body, shaking out one hand. The body holds a lot, so it's good to let it release. Shake out another hand if that feels good. You can shake out another part of the body, maybe a leg or your shoulders. Yeah. And just welcoming you, if it feels good, to bring your hands to your body. Just allowing your hands to go wherever they feel called to go. Grounding yourself here, noticing what's present. And I welcome you to bring awareness to your feet on the ground. Maybe give them a little wiggle. Press them into the ground. And I welcome you just to become aware of the earth under your feet. Maybe it's right under your floorboards, or maybe it's 10 stories down. Just breathe into that connection of your foot to earth, soul to soul, palm to palm. And I want to give great thanks to sweet Mother Earth for holding us up today and every day as we gather here to talk about shifting power in the food system. Thank you, sweet Earth, for always nourishing us and supporting us, holding us, even when things are chaotic and changing. You're always there to ground and support us. And I want to give thanks and honor to the stewards of this lands, traditional ancestral stewards of these lands, where we are, each one of us, benefit from Indigenous communities that have stewarded these lands that we are on across Turtle Island, who thought of us many, many moons before we came here in the ways that they protected and conserved the earth and seeds. And I'm here on the lands of the Ganyangahaga Mohawk people, unceded lands on the shores of the Iroquois River in Jojage or Montreal, Canada, Turtle Island. And it is my wish that we we all, in our own way, can be connected to these communities that whose lands we're on. And perhaps I'll give a space for us each in our own ways to acknowledge the people's lands that we are on. You can do it in a silent way, in your own way. You can write it in the chat if that feels good. But yeah, with that wish of continuing forward the generosity that has been shown to us for the next generations, for the next 7 generations, so that we can all sustainably continue to live here. Thank you so much. I'm seeing the honoring of the Haudenosaunee people and the many nations whose lands we're on. Thank you. It's lovely to see these names. And these peoples, yeah. Thank you. And so as these continue to roll through, I'll pass it over to Yolanda.
Good afternoon, all. I'm Yolanda Owens. I too work with Rahana and the outside as we've been in this amazing journey with NFSN. I come to you from Central Ohio, honoring the Hopewell and Shawnee peoples that lived here before me. And I wanted to talk a little bit as we have grounded ourselves and we are giving honor to the earth that gives us so much, also wanting to create a space for us to be able to share as we move into this work of shifting power. And so we have some community agreements, some things that we really want to allow us to create this space for us to have these really deep, meaningful, and sometimes often difficult conversations. And so I was asking you to recognize that in every chair, so wherever you're sitting or however you're sitting, wherever you are, there is a leader. So every square that you see on the screen is a leader. Noticing power dynamics in the room, what we want to do is we want to look for learning. So looking for opportunities to be able to listen, as well as one of the other things is making sure that we want to take and make space, creating space for multiple truths. We want to make sure that in this, we are also examining racially biased systems and processes, which is why we are here and looking at what are the power dynamics in that. And in that, what we want to do is in creating this space, we want to make sure that we are taking care of both ourselves and each other, because we all are in this work together, and it's going to take all of us as we're looking at this as a network of people. Also, we've recognized for the past year and a half, as we've had more and more meetings in this Zoom space, that the world still is going on around us, including our homes. And so children are always welcome. So if you have little people that like to pop their heads in, that is okay. We welcome them. Sometimes they have great ideas too. And also want to make sure that we are focused on our common goals as we move through this, because the idea is as a network, we are all moving toward this common goal of being able to create space so that we all hold power in a racially just food system. And one of the things that in all of these community agreements, what we want to think about in the spaces that we hold is that while we all like to be in a space of being very comfortable, where we want to move into a little bit is this space of being able to, you can go ahead and click on the next slide for me there, is moving into a space of what we call the stretch zone. So of course, the comfort zone is where we all like to be, but where we're working on today and where we're going to be able to do our best work in the shifting of power is to be able to be in the stretch zone. So where we are asking questions and we are listening, and it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable. Just like sometimes when we reach down and we try to touch our toes, those hammies pull. But that stretching, right? But where we want to do is create a safe space so that we're not falling out into the space of where you see this panic zone. What we don't want to do is create a space where people turn into a space of fight or flight, where they might shut down or not engage in this conversation. And so we're going to try to make this space really comfortable in that we're going to allow us to stretch, but we want to hold it in a very safe way so that we can stretch, but we can feel comfortable and safe and held with stretching. So that's what we want to create for you. And so I'm just happy that you all are here and ready to be able to look at how we're able to shift power. Krystal has some really amazing things to talk about.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the outside centering us, grounding us, walking us through those community agreements and reminding us that we know these are very uncomfortable and hard and tough conversations. And we want to feel like we're panicking, right? But we want to bring you into this space of like being uncomfortable and being comfortable about being uncomfortable, right? That's where we want you to live. So next slide. What's really important is that when we're doing this work, that question of why, like, why are we in this space of talking about racial equity? And I say that because there's so many conversations around equity, which is broader. We could talk about women's issues or LGBTQ issues. There's so many conversations, but we're having a conversation specifically around racial equity and creating a space and a moment for that conversation, and being unapologetic about it. But then why? Do you see this push to have this conversation around racial equity? And for me, it's that concept of decolonizing the nonprofit sector, right? Decolonizing the work. And what does that look like? Decolonizing nonprofits means decentering whiteness and honoring differences within our organizations. It means discovering how our ancestors worked to care, right, for their communities before nonprofits even existed, and creating that space where people of color and employees can feel safe, and that nonprofits are no longer also places of harm and trauma. And so that's one of the reasons that I really focus on this concept of decolonizing the nonprofit sector. And I think it's really important to put that framework of why we're even having this conversation. Next slide. So concepts at the top of mind. Anytime you're having these conversations, I always think it's important to have the framework of why you're here and what to always just keep right there when you're having the conversations. And there's this concept of justice before harmony. And we lean into wanting to have conflict resolution and harmony, but you cannot achieve racial justice, right, unless you push through those spaces sometimes, and it will be uncomfortable. And we have to ask ourselves, why would somebody experiencing racial injustice, watching someone ignore and benefit from those injustices, want harmony, right? When we can't prioritize that over justice. We can't say we want peace and conflict resolution and harmony before we want to ensure that people that are impacted have justice. And then there's also this concept of the inconsequential nature of intent versus impact. We all have these conversations about understanding intent versus impact, and that is important, right? Because there's layers to these conversations where someone can be intending to harm you or not intending to harm you. But what's important and what people have to hold is that harm is harm, right? The impact has not been lessened by intentionality. And so it's really important that we keep that also at the frame of mind. And when we think about it, sometimes for me, in like different spaces, a progressive person might say that we didn't mean it, right? I didn't mean to say that. I didn't mean to harm, but if there was never really a change, you can't keep on being in this space of I didn't intend, right? Without taking steps to change and shift. Next slide. And so that is what brings us, NFSN, to our call to action that by 2025, 100% of communities hold power in a racially just food system. And by no means, and that's launching this call to action, did we think that we, NFSN, can do this on our own. We know that we have to create a space where everyone holds power, but we also know that we, as NFSN, can't define what power looks like. That is something that each individual and community has to define for themselves. So we see our role as a nonprofit, as a network, is to ensuring that these organizations and communities have funding through policy, research, legislation, the tools that they need to shift power in their own communities. Next slide. So the evolution of thought, right? I know everyone's probably seen this graphic in some way, shape, or form, right? We always talk about equality and then equity and liberation, right? This is how we move to this call to action, right? When you think about 100% of communities holding power in a racially just food system, right? That's that liberation idea, that there is nothing there. Everyone holds power, right? Everyone is in this utopia, this thing that we want to exist. But there's something missing about how we get there, right? Next slide. And that's this. When I saw this image, I fell in love with it because I was like, this is it, right? That justice piece is what's missing. Like, we see equality, equity, and then liberation, but where does Vince go? Like, how did we get there? And this image is everyone, and the person with the most privilege is the one knocking it down, shifting it, changing things. And for NFSN, that's the concept for us of shifting power. That is our how we see our role and self in making sure that we're part of getting justice, is by shifting power. So our role as a national nonprofit is to shift our organization to be one that is in serving of BIPOC-led and serving organizations that are working to shift power in the food system. Next slide. So our overview today, we are going to talk about what is power. We're going to talk about shifting your individual thinking, shifting your organizational culture. We're also going to have, again, a graphic artist who's going to be capturing the visual of this conversation so that they can share it with everyone at the end of the presentation. Then we're gonna have a break for 30 minutes, and then everyone had the opportunity to dive into what does this look like in the work. So we have 2 sessions, one that's gonna be focusing on procurement, values aligned procurement, and 1 session that's gonna be focusing on farm to school and action and ECE from this racial equity lens. And then in the evening, we'll have a screening and conversation, a real deep dive example of what this looks on the local level to shift power. So today we're going to have so many different conversations, and we hope that you can be with us all day today, right? To learn and dive into these conversations. Next slide. So first, what is power? Power is such a big word. Next slide. It can look like the power you hold. It can look like the power that other people hold over you, right? When you think about this word, it's just so big that you don't even know sometimes how to tackle it, right? Next slide. So when you think about power, right? The power, right? Next slide. Yeah, the power that you have yourself, and the power that people have over you. You also have these layers of individual, community, organization, institution, right? It's so complicated and layered. But for this exercise, we really want for people to start honing in on what their individual power is. So we're going to have, throughout the session, I'm going to talk about theories and ideas and concepts, and then to give you a chance to unpack them. So we're going to have this back and forth space. I do not want to just talk at you. I really want you to be able to unpack all the things that we're talking about. A lot of times in sessions, you just hear a lot, and then maybe a month or a week or a year later, you're trying to revisit them. So what we're going to try to do today is do it in real time so you can already be in this space of thinking. You're not going to walk away today with, this is how we shift power. We've got it. Here's my manual. What you're going to walk away with is now I can start thinking about it. Now I know some tools on how I can start talking about this, right? In these breakout rooms you're going to be in, you're going to stay in the same breakout room with the same group of people. So you don't have to spend time getting to know the same person. You're going to have a continued conversation with the same group throughout the day. So right now, we're going to break you out into groups. And I want you guys to take a minute to think about, what does individual power mean to you? And you can start off introducing yourselves with your names and then tell each other what individual power looks like to you in 5 words or less. And then if you have more time, because your group follows directions, unpack that a little bit more. And then we'll come back and dive into the next section. So everyone should probably be getting a prompt to join their breakout room. And I will drop the question in the chat again.
Hold on a second, everybody. I'm opening the rooms and I don't know why it's telling me that they're not opening. Give me 1 minute. Hold on, everybody, bear with me for a second. All right, Krystal, we might have to pivot our conversation because it's not letting me open the rooms.
Okay. So we have a backup plan for when technology doesn't work. So do you want me to unshare my screen?
Sure.
Okay.
So we are going to pivot this conversation instead of small breakout rooms, unfortunately. Let me give this one more try. Well, it's not opening for some reason. Okay.
Are you, Tracy, are you able to create the rooms and then when
Yep.
you open it doesn't open? Is that what's happening?
Correct. The rooms are created, everybody's in them, but when I click open rooms, it just refreshes and nothing happens.
What if you did it manually? I don't know.
I can try that if we want to give it another minute, or do we want to pivot? Let's recreate. Let me try to recreate them one more time and see if that helps.
Yeah, so why don't we do this while you're trying to do that, and maybe we'll get the breakout rooms for our other sessions. But for this first session, we can just talk here in this space and using chat. And if we have some bold people that want to come off mute and share what that means to them in the first 5 with just 5 words or less. When you think about your individual power, what does that mean to you? Using my strengths to help. It means ability to change, choose. Does anyone want to go off mute and share?
I can share. It means that I can make a change.
Like that.
Or I can make a difference, depending on which one works best for you.
That's what works best for you. What resonates for you? Anyone else?
I'd like to share.
Mm-hmm.
So my name is Marcellus, and I would say power to me is the ability to influence the people or like environment around you.
I love that. Anyone else?
I like to share. I feel like it's also give me independence when I have to make decisions. So I make decisions for myself, and there's nobody like doing that for me.
I love that, the autonomy to decide for yourself. Yes, a woman after my own heart.
I share. I would say that for standing in my power would be not to take no for an answer. Push through the no.
Love that, push through the no.
I'll share too. Victoria over here. I thought about knowledge. Knowledge empowers me. And so that feels like individual power to have knowledge.
I love that. To know. My mom always says that's the one thing no one can take from you, what you know, right? I love that. And I saw everyone please take the time to read what people are putting in the chat. Power is resistance.
I would share.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I would say about kind of knowing yourself, and it goes according with knowledge as well, but kind of knowing and loving self. I think that will allow, that's the power I see. Once we know, love ourselves, we can share that and creates more power.
I love that. Power, knowing and accepting and loving yourself. I think these are all really great concepts of power. And what we just saw is that power is such a big word and it can't be defined, right? Simply, and that it means and shows up differently for so many people, right? So continue to share and read what other people put for power, but that's what we really wanted this exercise to be about, for us to all understand that power is going to look different and show up because it's so complex. So we're going to go back to sharing our slides and move on and hope that we have the tech part figured out before we break into our next breakout session. So we talked a little about defining power, right? So now we're in that frame, right? The framework of understanding what power can look like. And if you want to change the spotlight on this end for the recording. And now we're going to talk about shifting your thinking. So next slide. Now, when we think about shifting our understanding about racism, right? So many people think about racism in this very loud, bold, in-your-face thing, right? And they don't realize or are conscious that racism can be very quiet and soft. And even when it's those things, it can still be very damaging, right? And it could be very harmful, even when it's quiet. And I'll just make a note to change the spotlight for the recording one more time. So when you think about shifting your understanding of racism, that can look like tokenism, right? Thinking we're gonna just bring in this individual of color and they're not here because we want their ideas or thoughts. We want them here to validate what we've already done. That could look like being a self-appointed ally, right? Where you could say, yeah, I'm an ally. What I do is enough based on how you feel and you want to show up for a community. And I always say this, when you're going to be an ally or an accomplice or anti-racist, right? That's what you want to claim. That if it doesn't hurt, I'll say that again, if it doesn't hurt and it hasn't cost you anything, you're not doing it right, right? Because we have to remember that as people of color, that speaking up, being bold, and just existing can cost, right? Can cost dearly. And so being that and calling that and claiming that costs something. It's not a label that you could just put on. It looks like saying colorblindness, isn't it? There's no color, right? The idea that racism is largely over and dying out, that people of color are just obsessed with talking about race, alleging that discrimination itself, talking about discrimination itself is racist and divisive, right? Claiming people are playing the race card, propping up the white dominant complex. There's so many layers that are just as damaging. So we cannot think that racism simply looks like things with George Floyd and Trayvon Martin and burning crosses, but it can look really different. It could look like undermining, questioning the intelligence of, deeming, you know, that they're not a model minority for the people that you work with because of the way they present themselves is not the culture in which you find normal, right? Or accepting or professional. Next slide. So when we think about shifting our thinking and our understanding, so many people get stuck there. They're like, okay, I get the concept and the theory that I need to shift and I need to change, but I have no idea how to do that. What does that actually look like? So there's many tools that you can look at, but today we really want to focus on choice points, the idea that we as individuals hold all of the power to make these decisions. And when we do it, we can do it in two ways. We can make decisions that propped up the status quo, right? That we know are going to yield into propping up systems of injustice, right? Or there's another road, there's another path where we can be mindful to make equitable and inclusive decisions that can change and have different impacts for society and particularly marginalized and impacted communities. Next slide. So when we think about choice points, you have these examples that are personal and institutional. But for this part, we're going to focus on personal, right? Because we're talking about how do we shift as individuals. So when we look at choice points, that could be consumer decisions. Where do you shop? Who do you buy from? Who do you boycott? For me, an example of that is I'm part of the LGBTQ community, and I made a decision a long time ago. I don't purchase from Chick-fil-A. I said I wanted my money and my morals to align, and I couldn't put resources into an institution that would then fund things that would oppress my rights, right? That could look like volunteer work. What causes do you get involved on? Again, I made a decision. I said, I specifically want to volunteer in my spare time with nonprofit organizations that are led by individuals of color or directly impacted communities. Like that is what I really wanted to focus on. Charitable contributions. Where do you put your money, right? Socializing. Who are you friends with? Like we segregate ourselves naturally by associating. Sometimes if you look at all of your closest friends, if they all look the same, think the same, have the same core beliefs, right? Are we diversifying? Is the only diversity we see in our workplace? Is none of that diversity trickling down into who we are outside of work? Who we vote for, right? These are all places where we have examples of choice points for ourselves. Next slide. So when we're thinking about using choice points, the first thing that's really important is that you decide the outcome. Before you even get to the steps, you got to think, what is it I'm trying to do? What is the change that I'm trying to see? And then you have to give yourself space to do it. We move so fast on autopilot with everything that we do. And if we don't take a breath to think about the changes, we just get stuck in habits, right? So making sure that you give yourself the space to think. And then once you do that, you're going to identify your choice points. You're going to assess the impacts, like what are the current impacts of the decisions that you're making, unintentional or intentional impacts, right? Generate options, like what are all the different possibilities? Then decide on the action. See, this is where a lot of people get stuck because they're so worried that I don't want to pick the wrong thing. I don't want to cause more intentional harm. Don't get stuck on deciding an action, right? Know that sometimes you're going to pick something and it's not going to be right. And you're going to have to pivot. And you're going to have to evolve. And there's going to be a blind spot that you didn't see, right? This journey is an evolution and it's constantly evolving. So just know that. Walk in knowing that this could work and it could not work. But you're going to change. You're going to push yourself into trying. And then changing your habits. This is another thing that's so important. You can't do one thing and say, yes, I am a revolutionary now, right? It's like, again, I'll talk about myself. When I made the decision to boycott Chick-fil-A, I couldn't just say, well, there you go. I have done it. I have, changed the landscape by boycotting this one entity. I said, no, I'm making a decision to align my money with my morals. So it has to be bigger than this moment of doing one thing to feel good. It has to be a real commitment. So I made a list of things I boycott, right? And I tell people it. And it's not so that I'm shaming other people or want them to do it too. It's so that they can keep me accountable. All my friends know I don't eat Chick-fil-A. I don't eat Papa John's because their stance on healthcare. I don't shop at Hobby Lobby because they don't believe in giving women contraceptives. I have a list of things that align with my morals. And I make sure I articulate them, because don't think one action is enough. It has to actually change the way in which you walk and show up in the world. So now, next slide, hopefully we'll be able to do these breakout rooms. Tech, are we going to be able to do some breakout rooms?
I think so. I have a new thing to try.
Awesome. So now we're going to try this, right? We're going to try using choice points. So what I want you guys to do is identify a choice point, generate some options, and select a new course of action. And so since we weren't able to do the first icebreaker, start with introducing yourselves and then jump into this conversation about where you think you can pivot and start to make different decisions that align with your values and your morals and the impacts that you want to have. So we're going to drop the link, because I know that you might want to be able to see the list of all of the steps in the chat. So those are the questions. Here's a link to the steps. And you guys should be getting a prompt to join a breakout room.
Woohoo, it worked.
Yay, see you guys soon.
If you're still here in the main room and you are listening and haven't seen a prompt yet, let me know and I can send you to a room. Okay, I'm gonna start sending people. You should have gotten an invite, but I will just send you another invite. Okay, I don't see anybody left on my list, but I still see a few people in the room. If you have an invite to accept that, please, to go into your breakout room. Krystal, do you want me? I can copy and paste those questions too to broadcast to everybody just another time to make sure they show up.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Sheree. Could you send me to a breakout room?
Sure. Spell your name for me, Sheree.
It's CHERRAYE. Last name is Oates, OATS.
Also, I see, and I don't know if you already saw this note from a Carol in the chat about she clicked the wrong button.
I just invited Carol to room 5.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
And she's joined.
Hold on 1 second. Somebody else has asked. Hi, let me send you, we're in breakout rooms right now. I'm gonna send you to one right now.
Welcome. It's a revolving door of people coming in and going to a breakout room. It's like this, it's going to be like this for a while because people just keep coming.
Yeah, people just keep coming.
Great.
I'm still looking to see if there's other people who haven't.
I think some people may have just not accepted the invitation just yet.
Right.
Is there anyone that's in the
I can move them though. That's the thing, is that I can't, like, if they don't accept it, they're still on the list. Like, they're not just in the waiting room list, they're just on a separate room list. So I have to like look at each room to see who hasn't accepted it.
Yeah.
Tracy, do you want me to broadcast to the room since you're working on that?
Sure, that'd be great.
And you were just going to resend the 3 questions?
Yeah, I was just going to resend the 3 questions.
And then did we also give them a time that we're going to come back?
I didn't give the time because I wasn't sure
what would happen.
Here. So I'll just give them a 2-minute warning because I'm trying to be, it's supposed to be 10 minutes, but I don't.
Maybe tell them when they're halfway through their time and then
Yeah.
a minute warning.
See, we started at 42.
So in another minute or 2, say 5 more minutes or something. Does that work for you timing wise?
No, I think maybe say in like 2 minutes, say another like 2 minutes.
Okay.
Well, if I'm going to broadcast them a message now, should I give them a heads up of how many more minutes we're thinking? I guess I'm confused. I should wait 2 minutes to send.
You want to just say we'll come back at 10 too? Does that work, Krystal, timing wise?
Yeah, if they went in at 42, then it'd be 52, right?
Right, but I'm having to carve time places because we are not on time. So yeah, that's fine.
So 10 too?
Yeah, that's fine.
Well, they can come back at 1:50 Eastern time. And they'll get a 1-minute warning.
That's fine.
Yeah, Krystal, basically I figured out that, which makes no logical sense. The more people in the room, the less breakout rooms you are allowed to have. So it didn't give me any warning or any message about why it wouldn't let me do it, but I like Googled and figured out that I could only open 30 rooms for the amount of people we had.
Did we say we'll gather back at 52?
No, at 1:50.
1:50. Okay, those things have been shared. Tracy, do I need to include the Zoom version note in our 2 other reminders that are going out, or are there no breakouts for those?
That's a good question. I think that they're planning to do breakouts, but I'm not 100% sure. But I actually think it doesn't matter because we're not over 500 for registration for either of those. And the evening one, if you're sending Oh, that one's an automated reminder.
It's automated.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's fine.
correct.
It doesn't matter because that's a webinar anyway. Is literally just a revolving door of attendees today.
And we're at 1:49.
You want me to close the rooms, giving them a minute to come back?
Because that's how it works, right? When you close it,
It gives it 59 seconds. Yeah, and usually they talk right till the last minute.
Yeah, so I think send that out. And Lacey, if you can be ready to share back the slides.
And Krystal, you were asking to be spot lit, right? Because I took it off and then you just wanted it back on, right, while you were talking?
Right, because when you see the recording, it won't be there if you don't. Mm-hmm.
We made that happen. I just wanted to be sure that's what you were asking.
Yeah. I see everyone's popping back in. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. I know those breakout rooms are never long enough, but hopefully everyone has just really started to have that conversation and with themselves and have some ideas of what this can look like for them, right? In your everyday life, what could it look like to change and think about choice points and create new habits? So if we could share the screen back with the slides. Awesome. Next slide. So now we're really going to go into shifting your organizational culture. And so what's really important when we talk about this work around racial equity and this work around shifting is that you really have to do it in a layered approach, right? And it doesn't mean that you have to wait to be completely shifted as an individual to think about how do you apply it to your organization or your work. You just have to start. You have to start that process. And so that's why we're talking about this in these layers, that you want to shift your understanding, you as an individual. And then as you're starting to do that individual work, then you can shift your organizational culture and the way your organization exists, which is separate and different from shifting the work that you do. Because a lot of times people want to just jump to the work and say, oh, okay, we're going to shift and do like racial equity work. But the organizational culture doesn't align with the work that you're actually doing. So you have to be thoughtful of doing it in these layers and making sure you're addressing all of these different layers and how they intersect. So next slide. So when you think about it, some of the first things people can say when they're like, we're going to shift our organizational culture is that we're just going to hire a few people of color, right? That'll do it. That'll shift the organizational culture, but it won't. Asking them to conform to the dominant culture, the culture which usually does not value people of color in leadership, their traits, right? The dominant culture tends to protect the institution, right? Protect the status quo. So just bringing in a few people of color to think that that is what's going to change the organizational culture when the culture itself is flawed, isn't working, right? That can't work. Next slide. And then some organizations say, okay, we'll just work on the culture of the organization. And so a lot of people have probably seen some variation of this when you talk about white dominant narrative or white supremacy or white toxicity in a culture. What does that look like? That individualization or perfectionist or that sense of urgency. And it's good, right? You want to make sure you're addressing these like cultural changes. But what I have also seen is that there's some organizations that maybe they're predominantly white organizations that are having these conversations about power dynamics and changing these things and, you know, changing their culture. And then they're like, oh, no, we've done it. We've gotten rid of these things. Fast forward a year down the line, the organization still predominantly white and has a hard time hiring or retaining people of color. But they think that they have broken down this white dominant culture. But did you? There's something else still going on, right? Even though you followed this chart, you did what they said that you needed to do to get rid of the white dominant culture in your organization. So we have to be mindful that the conversation about shifting the organization and knocking down these concepts of white dominant culture, that they don't get co-opted and begin to center the needs of white staff instead of the intentionality of creating space for people of color, right? We got to make sure that that doesn't happen. Next slide. When I read a lot around equity and racial equity, because like we talked about earlier, this is a process and evolution. I, by all means, don't think I have all the answers, concepts, understandings, notions. So I'm constantly feeding myself thoughts and ideas from others to push my thoughts and my way of thinking. And I came across this, and I wanted to read this excerpt of this article that was written. And it said, instead of worrying about technical fixes to attract more people of color into leadership positions, you need to focus your attention on the white people who currently hold power in your white dominant organization. In other words, before attempting the safe, quick fixes to manufacture diversity, you might want to start by getting different white people. And this really struck me because I thought it was hitting on a point that as a person of color that I sometimes hear and see, is that there's this idea that shifting an organizational culture and changing and breaking down white dominant narrative is all about this notion of getting rid of all the white people and bringing in people of color. And it's like triggering, right? Like for some of our white colleagues when they hear about it, because the thing they think we're saying is to just switch white people with people of color. When what we're really saying is that the right people need to be part of organization that are dedicated to doing this work. And that might look like white people leaving and different white people coming in. And it could also look like people of color leaving and other people of color or white people coming in the organization. It's so more complex than this simple idea that you're just going to replace white people with people of color and problem solved. And I thought this article really did such a good job of framing that conversation. Because as a person of color, when I think about what I need, what type of leadership I need from a white person to share leadership with me, I need a person that can spend a lot of time thinking about their own privilege, and both from an individual and a collective space. And I need white positional leaders who will call out other white leaders on their white privilege in the moment to interrupt oppression as it happens. So this is to all of our allies and accomplices on the call. Don't seek to hire a few more people of color and expect them to change you. You leaders within the white dominant leadership structure need to be willing to change you first. And I love that concept. And so I really thought that's the framework, right, that we want to start with. So next slide. So we talked about, okay, we don't want to do this, we don't want to do that. So what do we want to do? We want to start by what we talked about earlier, creating a space for an uncomfortable conversation. That is even what we're having here today. This is a critical step for any organization committing to racial equity work for the long haul. They must be open and receptive to making space for conflict and emotion, because without this part of the process, you can unintentionally repeat the experiences that many people of color have throughout their lives, that the efforts are made to address racial inequity, but when the conversation gets heated and uncomfortable, then the group retreats. People retreat. They don't want to have the conversation anymore. And then often blaming people of color for causing the discomfort. So you have to be willing to even just create the space. That's the first thing. Next slide. Now we've done that, right? We said we are going to be a space for uncomfortable conversations, and we're going to be part of uncomfortable conversations. Then as an organization, you really have to ask yourself some key questions. One, right? Looking at the conditions. Do I or we understand the condition, the problem, and where it comes from, right? Do we truly understand that? Next, we want to look at concern. This is really key. Do I care about the problems and the people it harms? And this is so important because a lot of this work around racial equity, it's that saying, it's just the new Black. Everyone feels guilty if they say they're not centering racial equity. Everyone just pops equity onto a statement or a mission, and they don't really care, right? Not really. If there was a new term or a new idea, they switch it in and out. And that causes so much harm. Being in a space, taking up space, taking up resources, having a place of power and leadership in a movement, and not truly caring about the people that are being harmed. So don't feel the need to interject yourself in racial equity work if it's not what you want to do, if it's not the mission, the vision, the direction of your organization, if you're not dedicated to it, it's okay. You don't have to be. And I say that because pretending to be an ally, an accomplice, an anti-racist can create so much more harm than just boldly saying you're not. And those are not the things that you're doing. And those are not the things that you're centering. And then after that, asking yourselves, are you willing to change? Another key part, because you can ask yourself, okay, we know, we've educated ourselves, we get it, we know the roots of racism in this country. And this is not just a statement, we care about impacted people and communities. But then you take all of these people on a journey with you. You ask them, what do we need to do? How do we need to shift? How do we need to change? They pour out their stories, their pain, and they lay themselves bare. And then you say, wait, but we can't do that. We can't change that. Oh, no, we can't shift that. Are you going to be willing to shift and evolve your organization wherever it leads to meet the needs of the directly impacted people you're trying to serve? And you really have to ask yourself that, because transparency and honesty is building the trust in those communities, saying, well, this is the room in which we can expand. This is it. This is the box in which we can change. Having that understanding early on is so important, instead of pretending that you're going to be able to do something you're not going to be able to do, right? Next slide. So once you do that, you say, okay, we've had the conversation, we're creating the uncomfortable situation. Now we need to articulate this. We need some way in which we're going to keep ourselves accountable internally and externally. That's thinking about this equity rationale and creating this statement, right? Why is this important? That it can shape your team's systems and how you work. It gives you a shared vocabulary to talk about equity. Even at NFSN, when we were having conversations about equity, we realized some people meant equity from a broad sense, some people meant racial equity. And then there was this harm that was happening because when people were saying certain things or moving in a direction, someone thought, well, that's not racial equity. But the other person, well, I mean equity, right? And what that gave us the space to do is say, well, what do we mean collectively, right? So that we're clear. And then we landed on racial equity. That is what we mean. That is what we mean. Every time we say equity, we're not just saying equity. We're saying racial equity. And we made that commitment and that understanding as an organization. Next slide. So you think about, okay, how do I do this? Where do we start? By building a team and don't rush the process. And NFSN, we created these equity champions from different levels of our organization. This is something people opted into doing, had to explain why they wanted to be a part of it. And we're ongoing. We didn't say, oh, we're going to only meet for a month and then our organization is going to be fixed, right? It's creating the space for this continued conversation, and that knowing that you have to do this both from a spiritual and practical, right? Yes, you need the business sense, right? You need to understand, what does this mean, so that you can ensure that you are going to back it up, what you're saying, right? That you tangibly can see the changes. But the spiritual sense, you want to make sure that this is attached to morals and values as an organization. And then you want to try out worst case scenarios, all the what ifs, right? So that you can build like this equity bunker and tools and resources for how your organization should pivot and change as the world is changing around you, right? Next slide. And you really want to be mindful of challenges during this process because of equity washing, right? Signing on to big, lofty values, but not engaging in them, hiring people of color, but not supporting a cultural shift to retain them, focusing on inclusion internally while the field work perpetuates inequities, or vice versa, changing your work, right? So what your work is equity centered, but the culture of your organization is harmful to those same people of color and impacted communities, right? Focusing on white culture and privileges can be creating privileges of whiteness. So really understanding that concept as well. For example, an overview of statistics showing racial disparities in different sectors. While these might be validate the experiences of people of color, they also can leave them feeling detached from their personal pain and suffering at the hands of racial oppression. And yet this approach is also what can make it easier for white people to take it in, right? And finally believe that structural racism exists. In this way, the method can privilege the convincing of white people over the comforting of people of color. So people of color who have often had to accommodate and adapt and assimilate in countless ways in order to gain entry and advance in a white culture and institutions, understandably might grow weary of bearing witness, right, to white people as they're discovering and grappling with white privilege. Like the stages of grief, the process can include everything from denial and angry and guilt, feeling like the exception of a rule, shame. And meanwhile, people of color are asked to be patient and gracious and share their stories, as this is part of the necessary process of white people becoming allies in the struggle for racial justice. We can understand how that some people of color might lose their patience and check out and not want to be engaged in the process of another organization shifting their organizational culture. So those are challenges, right, that you might face when you're doing this. Next slide. So some of the things we did at NFSN, dedicated staff time and funding, created equity channel on Slack, built it into our job plans, created professional development and asked for people to do training centering on equity and racial equity, built it into our organizational assessment, our staff satisfaction surveys. So there's so many different checkpoints you could do as an organization to actually build racial equity into the institution of your organization. Next slide. So now, right, we've had this conversation around what is power, what does it look to shift yourself, right, your thinking, what does it look like to shift your organizational culture, the ideas of where you need to start, not how do you not fall into these like pit holes and challenges, how to ensure that you're looking at it from all of these different layers. Now we want to go back into our breakout rooms and talk about how do you evaluate your organization and your organization's culture as it currently stands. So we're going to drop the link to this exercise in the chat, but for time's sake, we're going to just start on that first question. In your organization, what are the characteristics of a good employee? How were you informed? If unwritten rules, how do you learn about them? Really start to evaluate your organization as it currently exists. So we're going to break out into the same breakout rooms that we were just in before. Going to drop the question here in the chat. And then we're going to dive into this conversation. So everyone should see a prompt now and just put join.
There's a couple folks still in this room that I am assigning to rooms right now that didn't get a pre-assignment.
Krystal, it's so great. And so many people in the chat have been mentioning how valuable the slides are and the information you're sharing. And I concur. It's really such solid. It's a solid journey that you're sharing.
Thank you. I'm glad.
Yeah, you're totally crushing it, Krystal.
Yeah. And you're so eloquent. Someone said this is church.
Totally.
The funny thing is that on my mom's side, it's like 5 pastors.
Oh, wow.
That's when I really realized that I was in a different cultural context, because I was like, wow, I am in the US with you. It's so different. That would absolutely never happen in Canada. That anyone would ever refer to something as church. Like
that means that you're getting sometimes people say that's a good word. So it's like when someone is putting together or sharing something that is really truthful to you, and it's like it's getting you deep.
Yeah,
like,
I got it.
Yeah.
It was such a compliment.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, this is
absolutely.
moving. Like I could feel it. It was so really. You're Krystal, when you like light up when you're on, it's like, it's glow. You're glow.
Oh, thank you. I tell people that.
Hey, Krystal, several people have asked for your slides. Are you planning to share them or no?
Yes, I could turn it into a PDF.
Okay. Okay, then we'll respond to that in the chat box.
I did see that, and I figured it was prompted because they saw the link, so I think they got excited about the opportunity. Like, oh, I can have access, and then when they went, they were like, I don't have access.
No, you can't see all my thoughts.
Right. So, I can understand why. It's a lot of great information, and to be able to have the space to refer back to things that are to process, like using the steps to be able to make those processes. I'm sure that would be a huge help to a lot of folks.
Definitely. Not doing too bad on time. So we went in at 12:09.
Hi, Tristana.
Room where I think the person is just no longer with us. So I just came back.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I can. Do you want to move to a different group? Looks like there's only one. Looks like there's one person in your group, but maybe they're not paying attention.
5 and only one other person was there. But to join another conversation, but whatever you guys think. I was also just kind of answering the questions myself, but I was like, I'll go back and check.
Yeah, room 4 has a small group.
Great. I will send you there and you can accept or not accept it. Not sure if anybody else. Let me look at this.
This is the same, they're in the same group each time, right?
They were, yeah, except for that.
Yeah.
That person I just moved.
When it says if 31 participants, that's here people who didn't accept the invitation to join.
Yeah, that's
okay.
That looks like people who are not.
Maybe at their computers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what's your timing, Krystal? When do you want them to come back? You're muted, I think. Or I can't hear you.
Yeah, I was muted. They went in at 9. So I think we can. Like at 2:17 maybe.
You want them back in the room at 2:17, or we'll call them back at 2:17?
Because when we call them back at 2:17, then they have a minute to come back.
Then they'll be back at 2:18.
Yeah.
Or I could do 2:16.
Yeah, 2:17 I think is fine because I just have space to share graphic notes and then next steps left.
Okay. I'm just going to tell them they have about 3 minutes left in their conversation.
We start at 9.
Yeah, they're huge groups, some of them. So
Oh, they are?
they're massive. Look at them. Some of them like 10 people.
Oh.
So
room 1 is pretty large.
So they can maybe have till
maybe till 20 after?
Yeah, till 20.
Yeah, just to give them some time.
Well, I already told them 3 minutes, but we'll give them an extra minute or
Not
two.
gonna count.
Yeah, they will.
It goes fast when you're talking.
Yeah. How many people total do we have in here now? In the, I guess it's hard
I
to see.
can't see because it like breaks them all out, which is super confusing.
But it's definitely under 5 because you can do breakout.
Yeah, right. We were in the
It's been like
threes.
high 3s is the last time I saw it.
Yeah.
Oh, there are 30 rooms.
There are 30 rooms and they vary
vary
between like
5 and 10 people.
6 and 10, yeah.
Cool.
I think some new folks have popped on.
It's questionable whether you should put them in a breakout room right now, but why not? It doesn't, I guess it doesn't hurt to.
Well, the challenge is because it's random assignment, I'm not sure which rooms they were in before. If it doesn't like it should automatically send them to the room they were in before, but if it doesn't do that, I would just be sending them to a random room.
And Yen is in a breakout room, isn't she?
Yeah, I think she's been moving around.
Okay.
I've seen her. Yeah, I've seen her in at least a couple of rooms at this point.
Okay. Because after we do apply for people to share their thoughts, which is next, then I'll go to her for graphic notes and then come back for the last slide.
She's gotta have been furiously, like I can't even imagine trying to capture this graphically.
Right. I'm excited to see it.
From the rooms and from your presentation, both?
Yeah.
Cool.
I'm excited. She showed that mini video. So I'm like, oh, it's going to just like magically appear.
Mm-hmm.
I know.
Yeah.
So cool. I would love to work with Yen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she's gonna be there all day tomorrow. I'm real excited to see what happens out of that.
Peggy, Sarah, and Tabitha, who have just recently rejoined or joined, we're going to be closing the rooms in about 2 minutes for the closing. So
I've been driving down the road, so I keep losing reception and keep going back in and out because I wanted to participate. So I appreciate you guys just letting me hang. I know which room I should be in, but also felt like I'm losing reception. So I felt like I was cutting them off. So I'm glad I can be in.
Okay, well then you can check in and like stay here and see the harvest from the conversations.
Sweet.
Soon. Thanks for being here. In and out of
Right. I was just over picking up my farm to school product from the local farmers, and now we're having the farmers market, and then I'm going to make all the deliveries. And so I was like, I want to be here for this though. It's during market time. Shoot.
So thank you for multitasking and just being with us. We appreciate it.
You want me to send the close message?
Yeah, you can send it.
We have 2 more minutes.
Will it prompt them out?
You can have 60. You can say I'll close the room in a minute, and then you'll have another minute before the rooms close. That's what I often do. Just give them a heads up. It's very powerful to be a Zoom facilitator. Just be like,
Yeah,
and you're done.
Okay, bye.
If it actually works, it is. Well, now we're at a minute, so I'm just gonna close it.
I'm ripping you out of your conversation.
I know. I always say that in real life, I could never do this. Welcome back, Adasha. Because in real life, I'd be like, okay, you have a minute. And then people will do whatever they want.
Yeah.
Which is actually kind of nice.
This part.
Welcome back.
Hi, guys. We
Thank
can take me off of Spotlight and we can just see everyone. Now this be a gallery view. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back. I hope you guys really enjoyed that conversation and really starting to think about, okay, what does this look like at my organization? Like if I really have to put a magnifying glass on it and see what the culture currently is, what is that? And why is that? And again, like I said earlier, this by all means is not going to be the conclusion, right, of your journey. And you're not going to walk away with like something I think even fully realized, but you're going to walk away in a space of thought. And I love that space because it's where you're just thinking and pushing and reflecting on yourself and your organization and how you can push your work to be really where you want it to be in centering the most impacted communities and communities of color. So now that we've had this space to have a lot of conversation and reflection and looking at possible tools and exercises around power and how we can change our own concepts and minds and our organization, I wanted to just create this space for us to talk here together on the main stage in the main room about any thoughts that are just some revelations that have come to you for even as yourself, as how your organization shows up, or just something that you want to share that came from one of your group conversations. So I'm going to step back and allow people to share either via chat or come off mute and share with us what you're thinking and feeling at the moment.
I found out that, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah. I found out that in my years, I'm 78 years old and served on a lot of key boards in the state of Michigan. One of them was the Federal Reserve Board, Advisory Board. And I found out that when they see you, when you have this, I was put on the board because Clinton said we got to have diversity. And I was the only Black. But what I found is that they feel that you're going to take away from what they got, the power that they had, this piece of pie that they got, and they've already sliced the pie. And then here you come disrupting that pie and you want your slice, which means it gets smaller. But what I found what gave me power is that when I was able to show them that by having me there, I brought in a whole market that they never even thought about. Mm-hmm. So I had power that they didn't know I had, but I realized what I had to realize that I had power. Mm. And when I showed them how by having me there is to their advantage, and the pie don't get smaller, it gets bigger. After 3 years, my 3-year term, I was probably the most effective person on the advisory board, because when I brought up my issues, everybody had a chance to talk on the council. But when I got to do my report, everything shifted to what I was talking about, because I was bringing more economics than anybody else. I was bringing in a whole new economic system. For example, underserved, which means what that means. It's underserved. Underbanked is underbanked. Mm-hmm. It's underserved. It doesn't have retailers. It doesn't have this and that. I was looking for partners. So it's not don't come in as humble and having them, they always think that you're going to take from them. But once they find out by having you there that you're not taking from them, you're actually bringing something to the table, your power accelerates. And then it's not there because they're on a charity or a mandate or a law. You're there because they need you.
Thank you for sharing that. Really appreciate it. And so powerful. Anyone else want to share thoughts?
I'm just jumping in on this, but I want to say that was amazingly deep on that level there. Thank you for sharing, man. We all have room to grow, and you gave them an opportunity, and I'm glad they seized upon it and see your value, man. That's awesome. And I hope there's more people like you, because we need people like that. They're willing to sit at the table and listen and then contribute and grow alongside everybody who's needing to grow. You know, I think this is a powerful movement, and you bring a very important voice. So just want to say that.
I think my
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Oh, I think my aha moment was when you, at the beginning, when you said it's going to cost you something, you know, and like here we are, maybe it's a perfect storm. I think, have we stopped pivoting? I don't know. Has the shaking stopped? I don't know. But coming together, you know, with these ideas, there's going to be a cost to all of us, you know, and we may not know that. We may not be able to choose all the outcomes that we're contributing, like the gentleman, Mr. Murray, just shared. You know, when you're sharing ideas, you know, people forget, like, you know, you're contributing and you're giving ideas. It's like, it's an idea, let's look at it together, not like this all the time, a conflict. But, you know, that creative tension, I'm looking forward to it all. But it's going to cost us something, you know. That was the biggest, get ready for the unexpected again, I guess. Thank you.
No, thank you. Any other last thoughts?
I would like to share. I just wanted to just chime in and just kind of say my experience kind of more on a different level. Just as far as like working with the DPS schools and being a part of DPS or a product of DPS, and knowing how, you know, what we were taught in school about nutrition and just how much, I guess to say like how much nutrition or what like the level of attention nutrition gets. And I would just say that with my position, and I know, I think her name was Tina, who said it in our breakout session about how we really don't have we kind of just teach what we're given. And I would just say that for me, specifically with my experiences with teaching, what I really try to do is take what the information that we're given or the lesson plans that, you know, that we're given and honestly, truly try to make it relevant to my students. One thing, because a lot of, like I said, I work with DPS, and so a lot of those high schools are predominantly Black high schools. And so my biggest thing with them is I always tell them, you know, I'm not here to tell you what to do or what not to do. I'm here to give you information, because information is what truly can change somebody's behavior. And so being able to know that eating healthy is possible. You know, in the Black community, we're not taught, you know, that we should be eating fruits and vegetables, how to pick fruits and vegetables from the produce section, you know, or we have these misconceptions that, oh, everything has to be organic or everything has to be, you know, it's too expensive. So of course it's easier for, you know, so like I said, in my community, we're conditioned to believe that it's easier and cheaper to go to the, you know, corner store and buy a whole bunch of snacks that aren't healthy for you versus you going to Myers or Kroger or your local grocery store and going to the produce section and getting actually fresh fruits and vegetables. And so I can honestly say that I enjoy breaking those stereotypes, breaking those myths, those misconceptions, those barriers, because like I said, our students need to know that it is obtainable. You know, and like I said, I I'm just speaking from my experience. That's one of the main things that I truly try to do. And when we do our evaluations at the end, and when we have the students, some of my teachers have students write their own summaries of the program, and to read the summaries and to hear them say like, well, I didn't know this, and I'm so happy that I know this now, and now I can do this now, and now I'm eating, you know, more fruits and vegetables versus me going to get a bag of chips. I'm actually going to exercise more now. And so it's really powerful, the information that we have, and we're able to, you know, provide for people. Like I said, you would think that learning, you know, learning about fruits and vegetables and eating healthy should be something that is a guarantee, but it's not. It's technically a privilege. We're not, you know, our youth are not privileged enough to get that information. And that's why all of our programs exist, because it's not something that is that is directly like it's something that is valuable to know. So I just wanted to say that, as far as just like when it comes to the different, just with that aspect in DPS. And I can honestly say, like, I enjoy being able to break those stereotypes and really break those barriers, so our students and our youth, especially our minority youth, can know that, hey, you can stop the plague. You know what I'm saying? You can, you know, with this information, you can tell your friends and your family. I tell them all the time, spread it, because your mom may not know. You know, your dad may not know, whoever's taking care of you, or your family members, they may not know. And so if you have that information, share it with them. And then before you know it, it's a domino effect with the whole family and everybody else. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
No, thank you so much for sharing that, how that actually shows up for you every day in your work of shifting power and understanding and breaking down like these notions and stereotypes of communities. And I really love what you said about, it's not about telling someone what to do. It's about making sure that everyone has access to information, because it's breaking down that stereotype of that concept that people of color just don't want to, right? Be healthier, do these things, or have access. But sometimes it's that lack of information, lack of access to things. There's so many other layers of conversation that is happening. And it's not about telling people, but it's allowing people to have information and access to make choices for themselves, and trusting people to have agency over themselves. So I really love like what you just said and what you're creating and giving to the students in your care. And so we've had, like I mentioned earlier, a graphic note taker that has been popping into like the different breakout rooms and sitting with us on the main stage. And we've had so many different complex conversations that sometimes it's hard to summarize. And so I want to pass it to Yin, that's going to show us a quick video of our ideas and concepts coming to life on paper. So I'll pass it to you, Yin.
Thank you so much. I'm going to screen share in just a moment and play back a time lapse. It will go fuzzy here for a moment. You can bear with me. I'll bring this up and I will play this back. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, everyone. I know you guys, I see it in the chat, everyone saying how this is.
Can we clap?
Yes, beautiful. And all of those thoughts, right? That we were just putting out these words and ideas, I think were just captured so beautifully there. And we'll be sharing these graphic notes so that everyone can have this space of inspiration to go back to and remember the conversations and the concepts that really resonated, right, through this conversation. Lastly, we want to talk about how can we stay engaged. Can we share that last slide? Awesome. So there's ways in which you can stay connected with us. We want to hear from you as you are committing to shifting power, either as an individual or with your organization. We're asking that you sign our call to action commitment form to share what are the actions you're taking and tell us how we can continue to support you in this collective work. And we'll drop the link there in the chat. You're also asking for people to sign up your organization to become a partner for the National Farm to School Network. And we're seeking partners from around the country, all 50 states and territories, and also sovereign nations to really work towards our call to action. And we're looking to build partnerships with organizations that are community owned and driven and really want to center the voices of the most impacted, who are not only centered but deferred to, and that align with our values of economic justice, environmental justice, health impacts, racial equity, workers' rights, animal welfare. And because we know that there's all of these intersectionalities in the movement and touch points, and we can't be blind to all of those spaces. And as our organization, our network shifts, it's important that we shift to be in service, like I said earlier, of those organizations that are working to shift power in their own communities. So we'll drop the link for that. And lastly, just stay engaged with us in your inboxes and on social media. You'll be getting a follow-up email after this event with a request for your feedback and some other follow-up resources. I know people ask about slides and the graphics that we're creating throughout these different sessions. In that email, you'll be able to update and add your email preference and hearing from us from the National Farm to School Network. And you can follow us on all social media channels under the handle @farm2school. Tag us in your posts to show us what work you're doing to build racially just food system in your community. And can you unshare the screen for me? And I just want to again thank everyone for taking the time to have this conversation. We went a little bit over, but not too bad. But I really think it was a rich conversation, and really thank you for allowing me not to be your facilitator for the day, but really to be that conversation guide, just to help you to stretch your imagination and your thinking and to really create a space for you to continue to think. So what I ask after I do any type of session, especially around racial equity, is for you to look in your calendar for next week, over the weekend. I want you just to jot down an hour minimum, 2 hours preferably, to just self-reflect, to dig into the tools and the resources that we talked about. Read on different tools and resources. Even if something resonated you and you loved it, or something gave you tension and you didn't, right? Push yourself to dive deeper into that. Create your own understanding and really give yourself some grace, right? Because this is hard, this is a lot. None of us have the solution because we're still living, all of us, white or people of color, in a system that is built to oppress us. We're constantly being colonized every single day and working to decolonize ourselves in our work and as human beings. So remember to give yourself grace on this journey and evolution of racial equity. And I hope you learned something that you can take back to your organization or just reflect on as an individual. We'll have a little bit of a break, and hopefully we'll see you guys in one of our sessions, our next session being one. What does this look like in farm to school? I know some of you were like, this was really about shifting power and racial equity at this like high level. Yes, it was, because we knew we had to frame that first, make sure we have the mindset of what that is, And then we could talk about, what does that look like? How does that actually show up in the field, in the movement? And so we're going to have two awesome panels, one looking at values aligned procurement and one looking at what does it look like in farm to school and ECN action. And again, we'll have the film screening and conversation panel today at 7 p.m. Eastern. So thank you all again for joining us, and I hope to see you guys soon. Bye, guys.